This is the story of the creation of the greatest country on earth, the most extraordinary experiment. And if you know about it, then it becomes a tool that you can use. And it helps you navigate the difficult times of today. It's dramatic. I mean, human nature never changes. So the people you meet are very much like the people that you already know, with the same sort of quantities of greed and generosity and virtue and venality. It's all there. And so it is as dramatic as anything you'll come across. But it also happens to be about the creation of the United States of America, which is, a 1 in a million event.
Hello, I'm Christian Vasquez, Senior Video Producer at KERA, and today I'm delighted to share with you a conversation we had with Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein, two of the most influential voices in American documentary. For over 40 years, Ken Burns has chronicled the stories that have shaped this country, whether it's the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, the devastation and profound influence of the Civil War, or the stories of jazz and baseball. He not only chronicles these stories, but enables generations of viewers to find themselves within it through his emotionally rich storytelling that is also deeply researched. Sarah Botstein has been a collaborator of Ken Burns for over 20 years, producing films like The War, Jazz, Prohibition, Hemingway, and in 2022, co-directing The U.S. and the Holocaust. Their latest project turns us towards the American Revolution, a pivotal moment that continues to shape questions about identity, power, and this nation's beginnings. In this conversation, we talk about creative process, the discipline of deep listening, and the values that shape Ken and Sarah's work. Please enjoy. Ken, Sarah, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
First question I have is, when did you guys realize that the American Revolution was the next film?
We were finishing our series on the history of the Vietnam War, and we had not quite locked all of the episodes in December of 2015 before it was a long runway of September of 2017 when it was broadcast, and I just sort of blurted out, we're going to do the revolution next. And I think a lot of it has to do with just gut response, like we were prepared now to go back, a really challenging set of circumstances. There are no photographs, there's no newsreels. So having had a film with an abundance of that, the Vietnam War, it was important to try to go back and look at our founding, arguably one of the most important moments in all of human history.
Sarah, what set you on a path to making documentary film? Could you tell me a bit about your journey?
Sure. I graduated from college in American Studies, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was thinking about going to graduate school, but not quite ready to do that. And I got a job in New York and was lucky enough to meet Ken. I was doing some old-fashioned PR for the underwriters of public television, and we would get put on different films. And I, in 1995, got put on a film that Ken was working on. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm thinking about going to graduate school, but what I really want to do is what he does, and was lucky enough to get hired on a series we made on the history of jazz music and moved to a tiny town in New Hampshire, packed up my car. My friends thought I was maybe a little crazy, and I thought I was going to be there for 18 months, and that was 27 years ago.
I'm so fascinated by the ecosystem of Florentine films and that you create. And could you tell me what do you look for, like in a collaborator or somebody who you could work with, or like what kind of qualities does that person carry?
Well, I think I've been a sort of hands-off teacher. I think we've trusted to process in the making of the films, and we've also trusted that process would be in and of itself a much better teacher than saying, here are a set of rules, this is the steps you should take. Each person will grow in different ways. And so I think we created an environment that permitted people to grow at their own rate, to discover what their own particular interests or strengths were, and that it's been really kind of intimate in a way that the films are handmade. Like you'll see on our American Revolution, hundreds of people correctly being thanked, but it's really handmade by about 18 people. And that's what we like, that inner circle of collaboration between writers and co-producers and producers and directors and the scholars who come in to help us interpret it. And it's wonderful. It's really a great process. There's nothing better that I know in my professional life than making a film better for some reason. And you may wake up the next morning and go, what idiot thought about that? But at least, you had a little bit of grace period where you thought, oh, we really made something better.
When we were working on the jazz series, I remember being in the editing room and sort of taking a deep breath, those moments in your life and you think, how did I get here? And I remember thinking, I am the luckiest person in the world and no one will ever truly understand what goes on in our editing room and what that collaborative process is like and how necessarily collaborative film is as an art form, but also how generous and extraordinary Ken is both as a director and filmmaker and leader, but as mentor. I think we, just in listening to him, it never occurred to me till right now that we all in our team have found a way to teach and mentor each other, and it goes in all kinds of directions. And it is at the heart of collaboration, which is what gives us energy and makes the film go from an idea to up on the air.
I'll give you a little tiny thing that I do, which is not really anything, but it's become a kind of a big thing among particularly terrified interns who are just starting out, which is after lunch, and we're working at a very high pace and a very high rate, I will wash the dishes. And the interns first go, no, I'll do that. Like they failed and do that. And all I'm trying to do is sort of say, it's possible. And it's not really addressed to them because interns are usually disposed to do anything. It's addressed to everybody else that we tend to get trapped into a niche. Like my job description is this, and I'm not going outside of that. And I want to show people that we can all do this. We can all wash the dishes. We can all make decisions. We listen to each other's comments and criticisms and ideas about how to make the film better. And it's not democratic because there's a final arbiter, but it is an environment in which you want to encourage people to do everything, to learn, to wear lots of different hats, and to be open to not just the so-called fancy or glamorous work, which is not, but the grunt work as well, which is hugely important and why films get done.
Ken, could you take me back to your college days? You've talked often about encountering the social documentary photography work. And could you just tell me, like, what was your relationship with cinema like then, and how did that kind of, turn around in a way?
I had a huge relationship to cinema. I kept notes on the hundreds and hundreds of mostly feature films, foreign films, Hollywood films that I had watched. And I had first assumed at age 12 that I'd be a Hollywood director. And I went to Hampshire College, and all of my teachers were social documentary still photographers, where they'd kind of dabbled in filmmaking and done that. And the biggest thing is that they reminded me that there's as much drama in what is and what was as anything the human imagination comes up with. And it was a really wonderful, almost instantaneous transformation. I got exposed to not just documentary, but to experimental work and all sorts of stuff that sort of stretched the boundaries of what I thought film could be, and not just kind of the classic Hollywood stories or the new stuff that was happening in France and stuff that had been going on in Italy and Japan and Sweden with Ingmar Bergman, stuff like that. So I was really loaded with a lot of head information about filmmaking, and they were disinterested in that. They wanted to shove you out the door with the camera. Well, how do you load it? You go, you'll figure it out. If you really want to do this, you'll figure it out. And so we began to work and make films and to collaborate with each other and to learn to trust each other. And we started our own Hampshire Films within Hampshire College that made films for nonprofit clients that couldn't afford to pay that. So there were no salaries, no profit, no just travel and lab expenses. And we just cut our teeth learning how to talk, how to tie a tie, how to write a proposal, how to edit, how to do all these things. It was really wonderful. And so I left, I think, with a pretty naive sense that I could not just go to New York, as everybody assumed you would do, and get a job, an entry-level, intern-level a job at a production company, but I would start my own film, Florentine Films, which I did with two college buddies, and it's still going.
That's great. Could you guys reflect a bit on when I watch the work, I just sort of imagine the hours and hours of interviews that are conducted, coordinated, traveled to produce. But when you're in, there feels like there's different levels of listening, right? Like there's in the moment listening, you're trying to tune into what the person's saying. But then in the edit room, it's a different kind of listening. And what kind of advice do you guys have on refining that skill?
Well, Ken has heard me say this. I think that listening is one of the highest forms of love and of human experience, interaction. I don't think you can emphasize how important and hard it is to listen to the people closest to you, the people you disagree with, the people in a room, the people you're making a film about, the stories you're trying to tell. So it's an excellent question. It's a hugely important question. It's at the center of everything we do, at the center of the human experience. And I think good films, whether they're theatrical fiction films or verite documentaries or more traditional documentaries that we make, which have a third-person narrator, listening is at the heart of that work.
I think what we have is our attention, and we as human beings use very, very little of our attention. When you meet a great artist, we made a film on Leonardo da Vinci, you meet someone who is so extraordinarily curious about everything. You begin to focus. We spend a lot of time thinking about what we're going to do or what we just did, and very little with where we are right now. And it's interesting that even screening the introduction, which Sarah and I have seen 6 million times, I was looking at it as ferociously as if I was in the editing room seeing it for the second or third time. And I was going, gee, I need to go and make sure that the level on Kanasatega's voice doesn't drop over this shot, the third shot of the thing. And I still want the fade to be different on the Abigail Adams stuff. And while we're at it, let's add a little more gunshots into the aerial of the drone of the bird.
I was sitting behind him while he was doing that, and I was thinking, I know the 3 notes that we've already talked about, but I think the best thing for us to do is put the whole intro up and talk to the mixer, because I could feel those tiny little things which make such a huge difference for anyone who's ever made a film. Just pay attention to the little minute details of post-production, because they matter a huge amount. And Ken is a master at pacing and at tiny details that totally transform a moment or a scene. And you can't.
It may be possible, to wake up an interest in listening, as Sarah's saying, of being attentive by the way you focus, the way we're obsessively, the stuff that we could let this film go. It's fine. It's really, really, really good, this introduction. But we're not going to, and we're going to fuss with it a little bit more, because it may have that, there may be one person out there who just that little adjustment is the difference between them staying with it or giving their full attention. And it was nice to see high school students and middle school students, really focused on it. And that's really important, particularly in a time when we lament the atrophying of our attention.
Absolutely. It's a very confusing, strange time for cinema, for documentary. There's so much to watch. It's overwhelming. Next question is for folks not particularly inclined to watch something that feels so abstracted to them, as the American Revolution. What say you to young folks? So where are they in this film?
This is the story of our creation. This is the story of the creation of the greatest country on earth, the most extraordinary experiment. And if you know about it, then it becomes a tool that you can use, that you can be inspired by, but also that you can use and understand. It helps you navigate the difficult times of today. It's dramatic. Human nature never changes. So the people you meet are very much like the people that you already know, with the same sort of quantities of greed and generosity and virtue and venality. It's all there. And so it is as dramatic as anything you'll come across, but it also happens to be about the creation of the United States of America, which is, a 1 in a million event.
I think it's very easy, and I think it's It's easy to be cynical. It's harder to be optimistic and generous. The longer I live, the more I believe that. And I think the film, hopefully there's some aspect of this history that touches everyone, even if it's not directly obvious, the thing that you're going to find moving, distressing, inspiring, devastating. But I think to understand where we are as a country 250 years after our Declaration of Independence, it's really important to peel the onion all the way back to the essence and try to really understand who was at the center of the American Revolution, what they were trying to do, what they were thinking, and how we have succeeded and failed as a people in the last 250 years, and to bring some optimism and move away from the cynicism and the divisions.
We'd like to put the us back in the U.S.
What he said.
The body of work, of course, is extraordinary on so many levels, but what's also extraordinary is the relationship with public media. You're a very unique filmmaker in the landscape with your relationship with public media. And
no PBS, no us. Period. I mean, the ability to spend the time necessary to do the films, the fact that every single film that we've worked on has been a director's cut, the fact that we can take the time necessary to do it, to engage the scholars, to not take shortcuts, to not just reinforce conspiracies or lazy habits of the way you look at history, to be able to tell a more complete history, to include lots of different people. This is the mission of the public broadcasting service, emphasis on the word public and the word service. And that has just appealed to me from the very beginning. There's not been something. There have been financial offers that have been attractive periodically, but none of them would come with the same degree of freedom that I have. And maybe going back to the themes of the United States, John Adams is always lamenting that there's too much ambition and too much greed going on that we'll ever be able to have enough virtue to make a republic. Sometimes not choosing the path that seems the obvious one makes all the difference. I moved to rural New Hampshire when I needed to get a real job. I had a real job offer. And if I'd taken it, you would have never heard of me. And I moved to a little village in New Hampshire, and I've stayed there. And I'm living in the same bedroom that I've lived in for 46 years. And a lot of that is just making the difficult choices. And public television was one of those reasons that it encouraged it. The fact that these films take a long time meant that the sources of foundations and individuals and corporations that support public broadcasting are the ones that were interested in the kinds of work that we wanted to do. And so it's literally, I could go, I've said this so many times, I could go to some streaming service or some premium cable and get everything I needed to do a film on the American Revolution in one pitch. And the time it's taken us to talk today, and given my record, they go, yep, here it is. But they wouldn't give me 10 years to do it. They would say we need it in 12 or 14. And that's not a film that I know how to make, nor is it a film that I think you want to watch. I think you want to watch something in which a 10-year-old girl from Yorktown, Virginia holds her own next to George Washington. And that George Washington can be complicated and flawed and still be the person most responsible for the creation of the country. That the person who writes the words that liberates humanity is an owner of human beings and doesn't in his lifetime see that, but nevertheless writes words so beautiful and so vague that everyone else has followed and plowed a truck through the little opening that he left and the vagueness of it. This is beyond exciting, beyond current, particularly today when we worried that the tapestry of our connection to one another has become frayed, that we've not figured out how to listen or how to talk with one another rather than just at one another. It's important to tell stories that everybody subscribed to. Stories are not about arguments. Stories are complicated. They sort of subsume argument and transcend argument. And when you do that, all of a sudden that person that you can't stand because they agree, they voted for somebody different or they disagree with you on this or that, suddenly becomes familiar to you. Maybe you still disagree. Certainly you still disagree, but it doesn't mean that they become your enemies.
I think I'm always fascinated that people want heroes to be perfect. Heroes are flawed, just like we are all flawed. And I think I have 2 small children. If they understand that the heroes were flawed and complicated, they will maybe aspire to do heroic things and not feel like they can't because they're not perfect and they're flawed. But I think the other reason why public television and public media and the public broadcasting service is so important to us is that our films live on in the classroom. Our films don't go up on the air and then go away. They live on in communities for children to learn from them, to use them in the classroom, to learn about filmmaking, learn about the Vietnam War or Muhammad Ali or the national parks. We spend a lot of time while we're making these films thinking about how the films can be used in other ways, and particularly with PBS Learning Media and in communities that public television has a central role in educating as well as putting really good stuff on the air.
This public television is the Declaration of Independence applied to communications.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. Last question, broader question is, what in your highest aspiration in your mind when you're in the muck of making the films, what can documentaries or what can cinema do for us?
I don't think it's limited to documentaries or film. I think it's about art. It's about communication. Leo Tolstoy said that art is the transfer of emotion from one person to another. I like that a lot. The idea that I don't have an agenda. We're not trying to make you feel something. We're umpires calling balls and strikes about what went on. But that somehow in the communication of that you have this ability to suddenly give the gift of emotion, not nostalgia, not sentimentality, but something higher and more durable and more lasting that has that possibility of waking you up the way a great painting or a great opera or a great song that we hear out there. All of it is the same, and it's people talking to one another and communicating things. So the fact that we're documentary filmmakers in making films about American history is sort of beside the point. It's that we're people trying to communicate to other people and are trying to figure out ways that people listen and ways that they hear and receive what might be that emotion, that higher emotion that changes things from being, something being the sum of its parts to the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. We're interested in that last thing.
That's great.
I just want to make work that will last, and everything he said.
Well, thank you guys so much for the time. Really appreciate talking with you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great.
You can watch more of Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein's work at KERA Passport. And starting November 16th, you can also watch The American Revolution on KERA Passport and KERA TV.